Hey there, fiction author. If you're done with files full of unfinished stories, struggling to fill in plot or get words down on the page, and immediately second-guessing everything you just wrote, even when you do, and you want the real secrets to writing fiction readers will absolutely love and gush about, you're in the right place. I'm Liesl, USA Today best-selling author of 4 genres, fiction coach, and story psychology geek. I teach authors to write highly emotional fiction that will resonate with readers because that is the only path to bestsellership and eventually living off your fiction royalties. Want to hear more? Let's write some fiction. All right, welcome back to the Fiction Author Business School podcast. I am here today with Maddie Dalrymple, who is an author, and she also serves other authors. So Maddie, why don't we start? I had you on the podcast a couple of years ago, but it's been a while. So why don't we start by just have you introduce yourself and what you do, and not only what you write, but how you serve authors as well.
Sure. I am Maddie Dalrymple. I am the author of the Anne Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts in Lizzie Ballard thrillers. And I also write, speak, podcast, and consult on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the indie author. I love using nautical metaphors for the writing craft and the publishing voyage. So therefore my tagline there. And I have several nonfiction books for authors. And I think we're going to be focusing on the topic of one of those today.
Great. Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is how authors can become speakers and kind of use that as a second line of income. I know that a lot of authors want to do that or are interested in that, but they may not know how to get started. So can you give us a little bit of an introduction to that?
Yeah, I think that that this idea of multiple streams of income is so important for people who are looking to really make the creative life their income earning life. You know, it's one thing if you're holding down a day job, as I did for many years, and you're kind of doing this as a side hustle. But if you want to go full time, then normally just being an author, as wonderful as that is generally not enough to produce enough income to live on. And so many authors are looking for alternate streams of income, and one of those is definitely speaking engagements. I think this could work for both fiction or nonfiction. The way it can work for fiction is very obvious. You know, if you have a topic area of expertise that you've written a nonfiction book about, then a way to both get the word out there about your book is to do speaking engagements. But the opposite can be true too. You can use the book as a calling card for applying for speaking engagements. That's really how it's worked out for me for my nonfiction books. I've, I would say, made much more for my speaking engagements about the topics of my books than I have from actual sales of the books. But it's a virtuous cycle, you know, one feeds the other. And so it can be a great way to earn income, and it can also be a great way just to expand your community, both among event organizers and other speakers, but also among the audiences that you would be serving.
Sure. So can you speak a little bit to, I mean, I think that most of my listeners are going to be fiction authors rather than nonfiction, but I'm sure that a lot of them, they're not sure how to approach speaking, specifically because they don't have that nonfiction topic that, you know, that's really obvious to talk about. So as a fiction author, like, would they be talking about their stories, about their genres, or like, do you recommend that they come up with talking points? Like, how would they approach that?
Yeah, I think that for fiction authors, the benefits that you can get from a speaking career are probably more focused on community building than they are income earning. And so, you know, whereas an event organizer might pay several hundred or even several thousands of dollars to have somebody come to their event, you know, let's say a writer event, and you're going to do a keynote on the benefits of indie publishing or what have you, then that can be a definite income earning opportunity. I don't see that many opportunities for people to go and specifically pitch their fiction work unless you're already a huge name. And I'm sure that the biggest names in fiction are getting paid loads of money to go talk to enthusiastic readers. But I think that for most of us, the benefit there is getting to know other well, getting to know the readers in your genre. A lot of these opportunities are going to be at genre-specific conferences. It's sort of like the perfect storm of finding the people that you want to reach, because, they are there, they are participating in that event because they love books like yours. And then I think that a benefit that is sometimes overlooked by speakers is the benefits that you can get by building that relationship with the organizers. And so, the book I wrote on this topic, From Page to Platform, How to Succeed as an Author Speaker, with Michael Ron, really focuses on the importance of being a professional. And you can go into these interactions with a very professional frame of mind, do everything that you promised the organizer you were going to do, step up to your responsibilities, give a great talk. But if you leave it there, then you're leaving a lot of potential benefit on the table, both for you and the people you're working with. So really consider all the people who are involved, the organizer and the audience, as the people that you need to serve with that talk.
Yeah. So if, I really like that. And if somebody wanted to get into speaking who isn't in it right now and hasn't ever done a speaking gig, how would you recommend they get started?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to pull together your list of speaking topics. You had asked about that earlier. And if you're a fiction author, how do you do that? There are going to be forums where just going on and talking about your book is appropriate. There are, I think podcasts is a great way to start, especially for people who are maybe uncomfortable with speaking. Maybe the idea of getting up in front of a group of people, in front of on a podium at a conference in front of dozens or maybe hundreds of people, maybe that's kind of alarming. But podcasts can be great because, here we are chatting, just two people. Nobody else is watching or listening, right? And so It can be a much more comfortable experience to sort of ease into it. There are lots of podcasts that focus on specific genres. Just go to your podcast player and search for your genre and see what comes up. There, talking about your book is perfect. You don't want to just have it be, in no circumstance do you ever want to take advantage of one of these speaking engagements and have it be, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. I mean, that's just general advice. On social media, in cocktail party conversations, anywhere, that's a bad approach. But you can, first of all, understand the sort of approach, the gestalt of the platform that you're pitching. Do people come on and give sort of an overview of their book? If they do that, then you should be prepared to do that if you get booked for a gig with that platform. But I think that what's even more valuable is to find some of those stories behind the story and to put together a list of those so you can both have them for when you're making your pitch, but it also just helps you think through it. And so for me, my books are set, most of my books have at least partial setting in and around Philadelphia, which is my home base. And so the setting of the books is very important. I mean, a lot of people who know the Philadelphia area will read it and say, oh, I loved reading about whatever, some recognizable area. If that describes your fiction listeners' books, then think about what are things about the area that you might emphasize. You might have a talk that would be, a tour of the Philadelphia area from Ann Kinnear's eyes, or Ann Kinnear's favorite restaurants and how you discovered them, or something like that. Maybe talk about how you researched those areas. Did you go to them in person? Did you tap into Google Maps? In what circumstances did you make that decision? And so any of those stories about the story, not the story itself, can be very intriguing. It can build that relationship and intrigue readers enough that they want to then go investigate your fiction book more. And you can just go through the list. If your book is historical fiction, then you have this automatic talk available that you could give to lovers of historical fiction about the historical setting of your novel. You could even bring props if it's in person. You could bring props that were appropriate to the era. So my key advice there would be thinking about the stories behind the story that will
We'll get back to the episode in just a minute, guys. But first, the only real way to master your craft as a fiction author is to deeply understand the nature of story and how every part of it fits together. And I want that for you. I want you to become a master storyteller. The chances of you making it big as an author increase exponentially when you master the nature of story, and the only way to do that is to practice. To that end, I invite you to join us in the Legendary Fiction Forge. Each month, we deconstruct a well-known story so that you can see how the parts and pieces fit together and apply it to what you're writing. You also get a mini lesson on how to craft some specific part of story. We have one on telling backstory through flashbacks and another on how to incorporate a secondary villain as part of your early story escalation. And coming up, we're going to do one on how to write a scene where you catch someone in a lie. Plus, you get access to the core workshop on Pacing 101 for fiction authors and 2 Q&As with me every month, where you can ask me anything and get all of your concerns answered. You get all of that for just $37 a month, which I joke is cheaper than a dozen eggs these days. So if you are interested in this premium training for serious authors, if you're dedicated to mastering your fiction craft, so that creating stories that readers will absolutely love, that will resonate deeply with them, is second nature to you, go to bit.ly/fiction pacing. That's bit.ly/fiction pacing, or click the link in the show notes. Yeah, I really like that. And I mean, even aside from, keynote speaking, which I think is what most people are thinking of, I think those actually could be really good answers to how to do a podcast for authors, or even social media for authors. We're always wondering what to post other than our blurb, but that would be one thing, just to come up with all the stories around the story. Even how you come up with characters, I think, is interesting to readers. You say, oh, I have this character, I wanted him to be this way, I wanted him to be insecure about that, I wanted to show him grow this way, even things like that. People are interested in that, and it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, and I think people I'll say certain audiences are going to be fascinated by your creative process. What goes on behind the scenes for creating the book. If you're speaking to a writer's group, then they're going to be interested in, when do you find time to write? How did you decide to, pursue an indie or traditional path? Who did you tap into for expertise? You can really tailor what you have to talk about. Like, your book itself is a topic depending on the audience. Now, an audience of people who just love mysteries and they want to hear you talk because you've written a mystery, maybe they're not going to be so interested in how you promote your book. That's probably not going to be intriguing for them. So really tailor, have a long list, and then based on the form you're going to be talking at, pick out what points from that long list are going to be most appropriate to that audience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if they had a list of stories and ideas front of mind, then it's a lot easier to tailor them to whatever you're finding, rather than looking for something and hoping to come up with something that'll work, right?
Yeah, and I really like that suggestion you made about this doesn't have to be strictly focused on speaking engagements. If you can have your social media presence could feed your speaking engagements and vice versa.
Right.
Again, if we're not going on social media and saying, buy my book, look through your social media feed. I can imagine a lot of historical fiction authors are going to have a lot of posts out there about, oh, look, I just found this cool picture, this cool photograph from the era I'm writing about, or, oh, I just learned this interesting fact about, how things were handled in this era, and all that can be great fodder. You can just have the big list of ideas, and it can feed lots of different areas of your marketing, your promotion, your actual creative work.
Yeah, I love that. So when it comes to the speaking gigs that you've gotten, I mean, do they all come from your network, from networking, or do you go out and search for people who are looking for speakers?
A combination. And so most of my speaking engagements, especially the paid speaking engagements, have been on my nonfiction work. And so that is an area where tapping into my network has been very important. But this is generalizable regardless of what your genre is, what your topic is. The first thing I always recommend is consider platforms that you have experience in. So if you're a podcast listener, then the best podcast guesting appearances to pitch are podcasts probably that you listen to because you're by definition interested in them, you're by definition engaged in them, and just as important, you understand the zeitgeist. So you know whether is this going to be more a presentational kind of interaction or a more conversational interaction? Is it going to be a 15 minutes or an hour and a half? Is it going to be a question and answer? Or, all those things you already know going in. So you can be very well prepared for that, and good preparation makes for a comfortable interaction. So look at the podcasts that you enjoy listening to. Think about the conferences that you enjoy attending, or the bookstore events you enjoy attending, the library events you enjoy attending. Look through all those things that you yourself are consuming as an audience member, and I think that can be a really good way to start that list. And then you can just kind of expand from there. If you love a particular podcast, then you can do a search and say, if I like this podcast, what other podcasts might I like? Oh, here's one that I didn't even know about. I'm going to listen to a couple of episodes of that and see if it's a good match. If I love going to this conference, what are other conferences that are similar, maybe in a certain geographic area? I'm going to look into those. So familiarity is the starting point, and then branching out from there will uncover lots and lots of other opportunities. And treating all the people you interact with well is liable to lead to even more opportunities, because if you go into an opportunity and you're a prima donna, then you're never going to get any recommendations for other chances. But if you treat that person well, you're not only likely to get invited back, but you're also likely to have them put in a good word for you elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. So can you give everyone an idea of how often you speak? I know it's going to vary vastly for people, but I mean, just so that people get an idea, do you speak once a month, or is it more like a couple of times a year, or what do you think the range is that people could possibly do?
Well, I suppose the range could potentially be just anything that, as much as your schedule permits and the opportunities allow. And so, just using myself as an example, I probably present several times a month. That's in a combination of circumstances. Again, most of my speaking engagements are related to my nonfiction. I've kind of set aside for the time being pursuing speaking engagements related to my fiction, just because to me it ended up being more, it's something I enjoyed, but I wasn't seeing a ton of return. I think that was just because I wasn't sinking the time into it. It was that's kind of the bad chicken and egg thing. But I focus mainly on virtual presentations because it saves me the time of having to travel somewhere. When I do travel, I have certain criteria that it has to be worth it to me, and worth it to me is different for each person. And so, in general, I only do paid speaking engagements if it's an in-person event. But there are in-person events that I know that I'm going to end up being in the hole a little bit because I have to, maybe my travel isn't covered, maybe my hotel room isn't covered, whatever that might be. But it is an event that I want to go to as an attendee, and maybe I get a free ticket. I don't have to pay as an attendee if I'm a speaker. So that idea of clearly understanding what the terms and conditions are of the engagement before you agree to do it is important, and then weighing those against whatever criteria you have for yourself. So one of our pieces of advice is understand what your goals are, because if your goal is income earning, then maybe you don't do in-person events at all, because right now you can't afford to subsidize the travel and the lodging or the other expenses that always come along with travel. Maybe you focus solely on virtual, and as a result of that, maybe you could do 3 a day, for example, around a book launch. Maybe you just say, I'm gonna take off work for that week, and I'm gonna throw myself behind finding opportunities to talk to people at book clubs or podcasts or whatever that might be about that. Maybe you're doing this more as like a resume builder, and so maybe you get one invitation to a really big, well-known, prestigious conference, and maybe that's enough. Maybe you have now accomplished what you wanted to, because you can now put on your resume that you were a speaker at this conference. So I don't think there are any rules. It's both what you can, what your schedule
Right.
can handle, and then what you're going for in terms of your goals.
Yeah, and maybe it's important to mention that. I mean, there are professional speakers out there who aren't necessarily fiction authors, like the kind of people that get paid thousands of dollars to go to events and everything. And I think it's important to understand that even though that's obviously possible if you want to do that, they put a lot of time into seeking for events.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have to build. Usually, people aren't making that much money the first time they speak. You have to build that up over speaking gigs, like anything else. So, authors can definitely do that, but it's just another thing that's taking away from your writing time. It's another thing that's going to be taking an investment of time, if not money. So it's doable, but you just, like you said, I think it's about how much you want to put into it and what's worth it for you.
Yeah, and I don't even think that people should be pursuing paid engagements right out of the gate. Like if you're just starting, go to your local library and say, hey, I wrote a book on this topic. I would love to join you for a book club, or I'd love to join you to talk about, whatever that list of topics is you've put together, and hone your talk based on those. Because if people know that you're offering this free of charge, you're kind of just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to appreciate that, and if it's a little rough, they're not going to be fussed about
Right.
that. And you can hone what you have to offer, and then once you have that at a point where you can step back and say, if I'm an organizer, how am I going to feel about paying whatever the amount is that you want to ask for this? And when you can say that, and feel comfortable with that, that's the point at which to maybe start attaching a dollar fee. And there may still be ones you want to do for free.
Right.
I've done libraries is very common. Like a lot of people, even if they charge for other events, they will do events for libraries for free or at a discounted rate. And so, you can be flexible that way.
Yeah, yeah. Other good ones might be schools, going to grade schools or even like middle schools or high schools. I don't know that you would get much pay for that either, but colleges are another good one. Local colleges like to, and they're more likely to have paid speaking gigs at least a few times a year. So those are other things people could check out.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. And I love the idea of if people are writing children's books, obviously, then getting into schools is the way you want to go. And I would guess that a piece of advice there, I don't write children's books myself, but if I were doing that, then I would have something that would enable the kids to go home to their parents, like if they're little kids and they don't have their own funds,
Right.
go home to their parents and say, this person came to the school and they had a great book, and can we, look into that, so that you are getting to the person who can, who's controlling the purse strings that way.
Right. Another thing I was going to say that you kind of hit on too is that we should probably, more than we do, view social media as a speaking platform. Especially, I mean, not everybody's comfortable being on camera, not everybody does face to camera, but we have this thing where, and it's common in online business, where if we don't get 10,000 views on something, we think we're not successful. But any place you go to speak in a room, you're going to have usually a lot less than that, So if you can build your social media and get used to doing face to camera, even just speaking about your book or your characters, that really is, I feel like it's almost a resume in itself for public speaking. What do you think about that?
That's a fantastic idea. And I think that if people, I know that social media platforms generally really favor live content. And so it would be super cool to have something that would be like, Monday with my animated characters or whatever that is, and just say, oh, whatever, every Monday at 9 a.m. I'm going to go live and I'm just going to give like a 5-minute update on what I'm working on, or I'm going to show myself drawing one of my characters if you have illustrated books, or I'm going to share an interesting tidbit that I found out about my historical fiction research or whatever that may be. And the other thing I really like about that is that can be a great market research for what really appeals to people. Like maybe you do the here's my 5 minutes on an interesting historical fact, and you're like getting okay, and then you hit one that like really blows it out of the water. Everybody's liking it, everybody's commenting, and then you can say, oh, what was it about that one that really grabbed their attention? And maybe that's what I'm going to develop a whole talk about, just focused on that one thing that I can see people are really engaged on. I really like that idea.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And people are always, I know authors are always struggling with what to post on social media, so that would be a good way to come up with some content as well.
Yeah.
Do you, and this is kind of a funny story for me, just this past last end of last week and through the weekend, I went to a writing conference where I did some presentations, and we had horrendous weather here like that weekend. It was like, of course, it was that weekend where we got snow dumped on us. And so I was supposed to go get some book materials, including some cards from one of my, it's in a storage unit. And because of the weather, I wasn't able to get to it. So I wasn't terribly prepared for the signing. I only had like a handful of books with me, which was okay because this is mostly authors to authors. There's not, I don't sell a whole lot of books at this event, so I wasn't too worried about it. But I didn't have any cards. And I had so many people say, do you have a card so I can look you up on social media? And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to get to them. So I just had them like take pictures of my book so that they could look it up if they wanted. Anyway, so what do you recommend? Do you recommend that if someone's going to be a speaker that they have some sort of card, or some way for people to get in touch with them, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think the business cards are not dead at all. I mean, I think a lot of people think, oh, business cards, they're so old-fashioned. But every time I go to a conference, I mean, I just went to Author Nation in November, and there were a certain number of people, and there was like a demographic theme here. Like the younger the person was, the less likely it was they were going to have a business card. But with a
Right.
lot of those people, like I would have a really interesting conversation with someone, and then I would try to like maybe jot a little note or just commit it to memory. But that's never going to work. And having a business card that you can share with people at those kinds of events is vital, especially because as you're saying, like, I don't even think probably it was that big a problem that you can get your books because, as you said, especially if you're speaking at author to author conferences and it's like authors selling to other authors, unless you're selling like books for authors,
Right, right.
that can be problematic. But even if you're not, my experience, and I'm sure this is true for other people as well, is that I don't want to leave a conference with like a book bag full of books, especially if I've traveled, if I've taken the plane or something like that. I just
Right.
don't. And so if I do see books that I'm interested in, I'm much more likely to just make a note of them and then get them when I get home, or order them and have them sent home or something like that, realizing that I'm missing out on the maybe getting them signed, but it's worth it to me for the convenience. So, but having that way of reminding people about your books is great. A business card can do that. It could include a QR code that takes them to their website,
Right.
like whatever you can do to make it easy for them to obtain your book or your service or whatever you have to offer is important. There are some options like, I don't know what you call them, virtual cards. Like I have something that I think is called Popl, Popl, and you basically like load all your information into it, and then you can share it with people. Even if they
Yeah.
don't have that app, you can share it with people phone to phone, which is like a clever idea. And I suppose if you're in with a very like tech savvy group, that could work. But I really think there's nothing like being able to first of all engage with someone and find a commonality, and then as a way of cementing that, hand them a business card. Don't go into the interaction just thrusting business cards in people's hands, because that's
Right.
obnoxious. But use that as a way to say, yes, we're going to keep in touch. And I think this is a great example of where I think people sometimes undervalue what they can get out of speaking engagements, both for themselves and other people. And that is follow up with the people. Hopefully now you have their business card, and when you get home, or maybe even that evening in your hotel room, just drop them a note and say, yeah, I loved our conversation about such and such. I would love to follow up with you. Can we have a quick 15-minute virtual coffee or whatever that might be? Then you pave the way to other opportunities.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I was gonna say I had something like that too. I don't know if it was Popl or a different one, but it was introduced to me at a conference that was not authors, but entrepreneurs who were very tech savvy. And the
Yeah.
thing about it is it was great. And I did swap information with several people, but I only ever used it in that group. And I think
Yeah.
it's important to remember that just like there's a lot of people who read ebooks, but there's a whole other audience who don't like ebooks and still read print books. It's kind of the same thing. Like with the tech savvy people, you can do that, but there's a whole large group of people out there that aren't tech savvy enough to use those cards. And even if you gave them one, they might be like, oh, that's super cool, but they're never going to look at it again. So
Yeah.
you kind of want to make sure that you're covering everybody, and knowing that also some people are what do you call that, like non-marketers, but they're not there to network necessarily. So they're less likely to follow up on an app, you know what I mean? Because it's not something that's like part of their routine. So in that case, it's also better to give them something that will fall out of their wallet or something. They'll be like, oh yeah, you know.
Yeah, and a tip that Michael, my co-author, finally talked me into is to put a picture on your business card. Like, yes, this felt creepy, but he eventually talked me into putting my photo on it, because, like, you leave a conference, how many business cards do you have? A bazillion. And sometimes all you need to do is see the picture, see the face of the person you got the card from in order to remember it. Another tip we share is that at least one side of your card should be non-glossy so that people can take notes on it without it getting smeary. And Michael actually includes his phone number. Now, I don't do this myself, but Michael has gotten at least one very remunerative speaking gig because his phone number's on his card. I don't do it, not so much because I'm that. Oh, and he assures everyone that he really doesn't get spam calls like he was afraid he would. I don't do it because I just don't like talking on the phone. So I would much rather make it easier for people to get in touch with me, at least initially via email. But the easier you make it for people to get in touch with you, the more likely you're going to be to parlay that speaking engagement or whatever it is into other opportunities.
I wonder if it would work, and I have no idea if it would. I'm just wondering if it would work to put a phone number on there, but then in parentheses put text only or something. I almost would want to do that just because I don't answer numbers that I don't recognize. So I'm not likely to pick up the phone unless they leave me a message and I call them back anyway, anyway. But that would be kind of an interesting experiment to see what happened.
Yeah. You could try it. You could get, if you already have cards, you could get one of those little label makers and try that. Put those little labels on. Just use it for a couple of events and see how it works. That would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I might have to try that. I need to get new cards anyway. Mine are so old. But the other thing I was going to say is that they're not expensive to make anymore. I mean, I remember back in the day when 20 years ago, it could be $300-$500 just to get like 1,000 business cards, and it was really pricey. But just like everything with the digital revolution, you can get that for $10-$15 now, and they're actually real decent, high quality, so they're really not, it's not a difficult expense.
For sure.
So, all right. So I like to give my listeners kind of a step-by-step process. So let's try to kind of put it together logically for them. If they wanted to start speaking, we would say something like, step one, think about things you could talk about, maybe categorize them by, what you could talk about concerning your book, like you said, stories around your book or about the writing of your book. And then maybe if they wanted to talk about anything else, nonfiction or otherwise, figure out what they want to talk about, kind of nail down their topics. Then they could start step two, looking around for speaking opportunities, whether it's within their network, conferences around them, like we said, schools, libraries, that sort of thing, and start reaching out, looking for speaking opportunities. Maybe start by not charging anything or charging very, very low prices until they get a few gigs under their belt, and then they have a little bit of a resume built up, and then they can start charging a little bit more. What do you think? What steps would you add?
Yeah, I think those are perfect. The only other thing I'd add is think through what's in it for the people you're serving. So the people you're serving are the event organizer and the audience. And so I think in general, it's useful to think about, what does an event organizer want? They want things to be simple. They want things to be organized. You can help them by doing things like creating a website page that's your speaker's page that has all the information they would need, which would be like your headshot and your short bio and your longer bio and your social media links and things like that. You might even chat with people. Like if you really want to be targeting people who maybe they host virtual book clubs for people, readers in your genre. Maybe just get in touch with them and say, hey, I'm thinking of pitching people who do this kind of thing. Like, what do you look for? Then, of course, thinking about how to serve the audience. I think your suggestion about testing things out on social media and with live events is a great one. And also just find representatives from the demographic you want to reach and say, hey, you're a historical fiction reader. Do you like hearing about the historical background? Would you rather hear about the creative process? Just doing some market research, because if you can have those, like your target, like what you have to offer, your targets, and then what the stakeholders of each of those targets is looking for, then that's really paving the way to make a successful pitch.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. That's a good idea. And I mean, in terms of, I think this is why it's kind of important for you to know, to have a good, like, authoritative grasp on what you can speak about. Because let's say that you are talking to an event organizer and they're looking for something specific, and maybe that's not directly what you talk about, but you talk about something adjacent to it, then you can kind of say, okay, well, I talk about this, and if I add this in or do it from this particular perspective like you want, I mean, it's like a resume for the job. You're just offering what they are looking for. And, I'm not saying lie about it or anything. You really will do your talk through that lens so that you're giving them what they want, but that also opens the door for you to speak about some of the things you want to speak about that will reach your audience. So it's just kind of about being flexible and figuring out how to bring it all together in a way that serves everybody.
Yeah, I think that is especially true for panel opportunities. Panel opportunities is something we talk about. Maybe people don't think of that as a speaker opportunity, but it really is a great way to, again, maybe more comfortable because you're not the only person on the stage. And a lot of times, if you go to conferences, you can opt in to be considered for a panel, and then the organizers will, assemble different panels based on the people who have indicated interest in that. And they can't always make logical connections. So, for example, I went to a crime fiction conference, and I was put on a panel talking about law enforcement officers making difficult, the gray area of law enforcement decisions or something like that. And I was like, well, unfortunately, none of my protagonists are law enforcement, but I thought I do have a very significant secondary character in one of my books who's a Philadelphia detective, and he's had to do some things that are kind of out of the bounds of norms, specifically considering engaging my psychic character in his cases. And so I thought that's legitimate. That's a legitimate, like you're saying, I'm not lying about my background, but I'm saying, hey, I've explored this topic because I have this significant character that is in law enforcement, and he's struggling with these same issues. So yeah, I think that advice about don't think too narrowly about your topic is a really valuable one.
Yeah. And that's another good point for people. Yeah. Cause I've done panels and things too. And if you try to, this is true across the board. We always talk about, even in our writing, trying to sound specific rather than trying to sound smart, right? Simplifying your writing. You don't want to be using a thesaurus on every other word or anything. And that's actually true of writing too. If you're trying to sound like the smart, savvy author who knows what they're talking about, people are going to see that fakeness from 10 miles away. But if you have specific examples about what you've written about and can tell stories, like you said, stories about your story, that's always going to come across as often. What am I trying to say? Authentic. There we go. I was going authenticity. That's not quite right. It's going to come across as authentic, and people are going to appreciate that and really connect with it better anyway. So just being yourself and talking about whatever experience you do have on the topic is always going to be the best way to go. I think the best way to engage your audience.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And here again, it's important to be matching who you're pitching. So if you're a beginning author, let's say you're a beginning indie author, and you've just published your first book, you're going to have a lot of really great advice to offer to unpublished authors or people who are similarly at the same level. You're probably not going to want to pitch yourself as the keynote for the Writer's Digest conference to speak on indie publishing. So just pick your topics accordingly, and then as your experience in any of those topics increases, then you can shift to address audiences that have a higher and higher level of understanding of the topic you're addressing.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Well, I think this has been a really great conversation to get people started if this is something they're interested in. Anything else you want the audience to know before we wrap up?
Just that if they want more information about this, I did write this book with Michael Ron, called From Page to Platform, How to Succeed as an Author Speaker, and I would encourage them to check it out for even more tips.
Sounds good. Yeah, I will make sure and link it in my show notes so people can find it. But thanks so much for being here with us, and I think it's been really valuable, so thanks for sharing all your insights.
Oh, thank you so much for the invite. This was a fun conversation.
Thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You can also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story, because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.